Hi, John Daly here, and I want to thank you for joining this critical broadcast. On June 12, 1987, President Ronald Reagan stood in front of the Brandenburg Gate in West Germany and delivered one of history's most consequential speeches.
Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
4 months later, the world celebrated as the Berlin Wall was torn down, brick by brick, by the very people once trapped behind it. The end of the Cold War ushered in a new era of hope and peace between the United States and Russia. Our economy soared. We fought off recessions, housing and stock market collapses, coming back stronger every time. Unfortunately, once again, a brutal communist regime has become America's hostile adversary. The U.S. intelligence community now warns that Xi Jinping, the authoritarian leader of the People's Republic of China, is preparing to launch a large-scale, asymmetric attack on our country and democracy. Every 12 hours, the FBI uncovers a Chinese spy cell operating inside our borders. 2,000 separate investigations are ongoing. Per the director of the FBI, Xi Jinping's mission is to transform present-day America into a Cold War-era East Germany, before the Berlin Wall was brought down and the Iron Curtain fell. And Xi is weaponizing cutting-edge American technology to pursue his frightening ambitions. Per the National Security Agency, President Xi has successfully executed the greatest transfer of wealth in history. Through relentless cyber attacks on U.S. banks, U.S. companies, our airports, and government institutions, he is robbing Americans of $400 billion every year, $1,548 stolen from each of us every year. Now, without question, China poses the greatest threat to our national and financial security. And this year, Xi Jinping brought his plan out into the open for everybody to see. On January 28th, Hawaiians looked up into the sky in shock as a Chinese satellite shot green beams down upon them. While at nearly the same time, 3,000 miles away, the infamous spy balloon entered Alaskan airspace. In the days that followed, it flew over sensitive military installations and hundreds of nuclear missile silos, reportedly transmitting sensitive intelligence back to China before being blown out of the sky. 66% of Americans now fear China has become a serious enemy of the United States. Those fears have become a reality. America has been forced into a new Cold War. Can we once again emerge victorious against a powerful communist enemy before the worst-case scenario is realized? Well, today, we're going to examine a shocking report. Much of what you're about to see and hear has begun to quickly circulate inside both Capitol Hill and Wall Street. The authors are joining me now to discuss their controversial findings. They warn that Chinese President Xi Jinping has secretly planted a network of Trojan horses in strategic locations across America to compromise vulnerabilities in our military, telecommunications, banking system, and financial markets. And they've concluded China's dictator is getting dangerously close to crossing the ultimate red line, attacking America's single point of failure. Inside this facility, you'll find something Xi Jinping believes is as important to the American way of life as our hearts beating inside our chests. Something our intelligence community fears will give China the upper hand in all domains of warfare, and something Xi's ally, Russian President Vladimir Putin, desperately covets, stating whoever controls it controls the entire world. So, per our National Security Commission, we must protect what's inside this facility at all costs. This is what today's guest warned the Second Cold War is really being fought over. And at least $37 trillion of the global economy is at stake. Michael Carr, Ian King, thank you for lending your expertise to this discussion.
My pleasure.
It's good to see you, John.
Great to see you both. Now, Michael, you're a decorated Air Force veteran who served during the original Cold War. As tensions with the USSR reached a boiling point, you were stationed in a bunker in Nebraska, which actually turned out to be the front lines for the conflict.
Sounds strange, but yes. That Nebraska bunker was at Offutt Air Force Base. Today, it's the headquarters for U.S. Strategic Command. Now, U.S. STRATCOM is in charge of the operations, defense, and attack capabilities of America's entire nuclear arsenal.
You tracked Soviet aircraft their jets and spy planes, using our military's most advanced radar systems. But you're also a member of a special class of airmen tasked with the military's most important responsibility. The nickname they had for you was really cool.
We were called Missile Men.
Meaning you had to become an expert on mutual assured destruction, or MAD.
In real time, John, when both sides, the US and Soviets, were still trying to figure it out.
Now, you were the person who would have gotten the call from the White House to launch a nuclear strike.
Only if the situation called for it.
And thank God it didn't. And by the way, thank you for your service. Now, today, Chinese dictator Xi Jinping and the United States are caught in a dangerous standoff. In 2023, the leaders of our intelligence agencies warned Congress that China, meaning President Xi, thinks we might be the ones to launch a nuclear first strike. Americans are worried history is repeating itself.
Well, history is repeating itself, and they should be worried. Xi Jinping is an authoritarian by all measures. Our relationship with him has deteriorated year after year. Today, Xi controls the world's largest military, and he's getting more comfortable with using it against us.
So when you hear our adversary is scared America wants to drop a nuke on Beijing,
I hear the delusional saber rattling of a dictator who is grasping at straws. Our intelligence community hears the same thing. China's nuclear arsenal is ranked third globally, far behind America. Xi needs justification to grow the size of his own arsenal. During the first Cold War, there were intense moments when our adversaries behaved like irrational actors. Now, we have the warning signs of an irrational actor, this time in China. The point of no return seems to be right in front of us.
And let's not forget, most of this is happening outside the view of the American people. They might not be aware of how dangerous this situation has become.
All right, well, we're going to make them aware. Now, Ian, you've been an ultra-successful hedge fund manager, an early investor in disruptive trends like cryptocurrencies and electric vehicles, and you're a highly sought-after analyst by all the major media organizations. Now, you had Xi Jinping's number before anybody else. Now, I've got a short clip I'd like to play. It's from January of 2020. No matter what the host asked, you only wanted to talk about this mysterious Chinese virus that had just emerged from a Wuhan food market or a Wuhan biolab. There was a lot of confusion. Hey, let's take a look.
The bigger story here that people have to think about when it comes to these the airline earnings this morning is what is the impact of coronavirus? And I really don't think we've seen this fully play out yet. I went back and I looked at the financial impact of Ebola to compare it to kind of the situation we're in right now. Between September and October of 2014, you had a 20% drop in Southwest Airlines in 1 month. You had a 30% drop in Delta, a 20% drop in JetBlue, and of course a 10% drop in the S&P 500. So I think that investors in these airlines really need to be focusing on what the headlines are coming out of China.
All right, now a few months later, Wall Street experienced the worst single-day crash since 1987's Black Monday, followed by the fastest 30% crash ever. Now, you believe a straight line can be drawn from Xi Jinping's actions during the pandemic right to our current crisis in China, right?
That's right. COVID was the canary in the coal mine for Cold War 2.0, John. Americans had lockdowns and nobody liked them, but Xi's lockdowns lasted years. They were universally oppressive and brutal nationwide. He created a surveillance state where neighbors spied on neighbors. Technology tracked every movement they made, and more crackdowns on free press and crackdowns on their access to the internet. And he used China's credit card to pay for it all. Look at that debt to GDP ratio.
Now, nobody's saying ours is great, but it took centuries for America to reach that number. It took Xi Jinping only a few years to plunge China towards economic extinction.
Ian, this new Cold War has already cost the world trillions. Americans watching want to know if this could push our economy over the edge. Now, back in 2007, you saw what so many at the time failed to see, an imminent financial collapse. Instead of running for the hills, you launched a small equity hedge fund that helped Main Street Americans protect themselves during the crisis. No billionaire clients.
Not many millionaires either, John. So I started at Salomon Brothers and then Citigroup. My colleagues at Citigroup underwrote a lot of the mortgage debt that blew up the financial system. They truly believed that subprime junk was safer and stronger than it really was. You know, long story short, and Mike knows this, they were the ones doing the speculating. I bet against the speculators.
And you were right. You delivered your Main Street investors a 3.3x windfall in 2 years. So comparing 2007 to today, what do Americans need to know?
Americans fundamentally need two big answers for two big questions. Big question number one, what if Xi Jinping has secretly bankrupted China? I mean, today, the world's biggest economies, the United States and China, are more entangled than ever before. And the risk of mutually assured economic destruction is very real, as Mike knows.
All right. Now, in a short while, we'll discuss where Americans can hide their money to keep it safe. But now, what's the second big question?
Oh, glad you asked. So the second question is, what if Xi Jinping is on borrowed time with the people of China?
Okay, you're speaking to one of your most controversial findings. You're calling Xi Jinping a paper tiger, as in much of his strength is an illusion.
Yes, what many see as aggression, we see as desperation. Now, Xi Jinping has built a very effective propaganda machine. Where he projects power is through China's population. They've got 1.4 billion people. That's 4 times more than the United States. But the source of Xi's perceived power is also his greatest vulnerability. Now, America has more total wealth than China, and individually, an average American has a lot more wealth than an average Chinese citizen. So after Xi imprisons nearly his whole country and secretly pushes China close to bankruptcy, what does he do? He rewards himself. Xi had each of his puppets in the Chinese Communist Party unanimously rubber stamp, voting nearly 3,000 to nothing to grant him another term in power. That didn't sit well with China's citizens.
Now, simply put, Xi hasn't transformed China into some economic utopia. And to Ian's point, the vast majority of China's citizens are poor. They're oppressed under his communist grip. While Xi and his family are living high on the hog, reportedly with a net worth of $1.2 billion. Any further disruption to that economy and the daily lives of the innocent folks living in that country, Xi will have a revolution on his hands.
And if China's economic strength was genuine and not an illusion, if China's citizens were truly happy with Xi Jinping, he wouldn't rock the boat and provoke a new Cold War with America. I mean, what do you think's in it for him?
Now, this looks like a powder keg.
Because it is. Xi's desperation is what makes him so dangerous. Look, he's a little-known figure in this country. He's not that mysterious when you pull back the curtain. In China, Xi Jinping is what's known as a princeling, the son of a prominent Beijing political family. Communism is his cult and his family's legacy. Xi's father even went to jail at 14 for trying to poison his teacher.
What, teacher wasn't communist enough?
Apparently not. Gets out of jail, founds the Communist Guerrilla Party, rises up to become vice chairman of China. They've got statues of Xi Jinping's dad all around China. By all accounts, he put his son through dictator boot camp, brainwashing him, and it worked too well.
Now, according to your report, Xi Jinping has developed a God complex.
Well, John, the psych and behavioral profiles on the guy portray him as someone who believes he's China's savior. Him and only him.
All right, now China's own version, I guess what, cult leader like David Koresh or Jim Jones?
It's a startling thought, right?
Xi turning China into a high-tech police state like some dystopian movie was our first glimpse into what a desperate authoritarian is willing to do to maintain his power. God complex or no God complex.
And now to maintain his power, Xi Jinping must project more power than ever before. He's publicly declared his objective is to win this battle with America. So the question is, how far is he really willing to go?
And you've concluded right to the edge and maybe over it. Tell us about this photo.
John, a picture says 1,000 words, right?
As the saying goes.
They're all frightening here. Under that snow, you'll find a missile silo for a Minuteman III intercontinental ballistic missile with nuclear capabilities. They travel at 15,000 miles an hour.
And if armed, that missile can deliver a deadly payload. How far?
6,000 miles in any direction with pinpoint accuracy. Roughly the distance from these silos to Beijing in 24 minutes.
Wow, I mean, that's as serious as it gets.
Sure is. About a third of a mile away from that missile silo, you'll see an innocent-looking tower. It supposedly provides rural America and local businesses with cell phone service, internet service, and such. It's a flimsy cover story. The tech powering that tower is from the pride of China, Huawei. It was founded by ex-Chinese military leaders. It's a state-run surveillance operation masquerading as a telecommunications company. You'll find a lot of Huawei towers scattered across 13,800 square miles of seemingly empty fields in Montana, where 150 missile silos happen to be located, all under the protection of Malmstrom Air Force Base.
And all those red dots around these missiles?
Each and every one of them, John, is a Huawei spy tower.
China knows we have missiles in those spots. The Amish in Pennsylvania know America's got nukes in Montana. The FBI, Pentagon, and the FCC have all warned Huawei's tech can be used to gather intelligence.
And China can use that tech to mount network attacks on our military bases,
putting those nuclear warheads at risk. Now, a long time ago, Malmstrom Air Force Base mysteriously lost control of 10 nuclear missiles. They still haven't figured out how or why it happened.
Wow. Now, these towers present a serious danger, really, to every American.
Yes, they do. It's real serious when drug cartels dig tunnels under our borders, sneaking in meth, fentanyl, weapons.
Yeah, sure is. Absolutely.
Xi Jinping is smuggling something into our country that is, in many ways, more dangerous. This is all well known inside the Pentagon.
And John, we can add another piece to this puzzle. China's been on a buying spree acquiring U.S. farmland, and they currently own nearly 400,000 acres. The scary thing is where they own the land, such as near critical military installations and those towers.
Now, you think China has just corn on that farmland? Maybe some of their technology, too?
All right. So you've identified 200 different networks of Chinese spy towers located in strategically vulnerable areas in the United States. So, for instance, they cover most of Nebraska, including Offutt Air Force Base, your old home.
My old home knew to be worried about this situation. 2022, the local press warned that Huawei towers could be weaponized. 2023, here comes that spy balloon floating 4 miles inside the danger zone where our jet fighters fly, straight from Malmstrom to Offutt Air Force Base, where it hovered directly above the very nuclear missiles I used to guard. That balloon didn't accidentally find itself there. It was carrying a high-tech cyber warfare payload the size of 3 school buses. Much of that technology was probably American in origin, straight from Xi Jinping's strategic reserves.
And after an F-16 blasted that spy balloon out of the sky, do you think we were able to rule out that China actually attacked us?
We couldn't?
What if all China wanted to accomplish was for that spy balloon to drop a piece of code, a digital bomb, down from the sky? One that could remain dormant and harmless until it wasn't.
Your report classifies that spy balloon and those towers as 2 types of Trojan horses that Xi Jinping has smuggled into America. Now, altogether, he secretly infected nearly every critical area of our economy, military infrastructure, leading industries, including our financial markets.
Right. Those Trojan horses are like sleeper cells. The more desperate Xi Jinping becomes, the more likely he is to wake them up.
At his most desperate, you warned that President Xi could cross a red line. He could attack America's single point of failure. That brings us to this futuristic facility.
John, this facility is ground zero for the new Cold War. Inside is a critical vulnerability that could incapacitate America's banking system, financial markets, power grid, and the military. Now, if this facility fell into the wrong hands, as in Xi Jinping's, he'd have the power to stop America's economy and society from functioning. And that's just not me saying it. That's from a well-respected economic and military think tank. Now, Xi attacking that facility would instantly transform Cold War II into World War III.
Wow. Okay. Now, before we proceed, you've investigated all the spycraft, the espionage. You've analyzed China's moves, talked to your contacts. You've compiled everything into this comprehensive report. It reads kind of like a Tom Clancy book. Now, you've agreed to grant our viewers uncensored, unfiltered access to your work, correct?
Yes, we want to give Americans this info so they can decide for themselves how to best prepare for the future.
All right. Now, if you'd like access to this report, we'll make it available after our discussion here. Now, I strongly suggest you see this with your own eyes. Okay, so Mike, tell us about America's single point of failure.
John, look at it this way. Cold War 1.0 was about big, big things. The space race, the nuclear arms race, who could control these big things. Cold War 2.0 is being fought over the miniaturized brains that control the entire world. That facility is where you'll find the world's most futuristic semiconductors, what are called leading-edge chips.
And 36,000 of these must be manufactured every second or the world stops running. These chips have become so important to our lives that they're called the new oil.
The good news about these chips is really good. The bad news, really bad.
All right. How about the good news first, please?
I'll take this, Mike. The good news, John, is that 85% of the leading edge chips in the world's smartest drones, weapons, radar, and defense systems are invented by American companies, not Chinese companies. Now, 85% of the chips in our smart cars, smartphones, our power grid, oil drilling, and fracking technology, our computers, the chips powering the world's financial markets, advanced medical devices in hospitals, anything artificial intelligence related, they're America's patented designs. They're our intellectual property.
American companies are the brains behind the brains of the modern world. That's the good news.
Okay, the bad news?
We aren't the brawn. We don't manufacture the chips, but neither does China. For the most part, when China makes an iPhone or something, they're just taking the critical pieces other nations invented and manufactured, then putting those pieces together, which brings us to the really bad news. That facility is nowhere near our borders where we can protect it. It's located 8,021 miles from Washington, D.C., but only 110 miles from China in Taiwan.
Now, Taiwan manufactures 92% of the American chips that the world needs to function. Apple and Intel get their American-invented leading-edge chips from Taiwan. There are about 1,000 chips in a modern gas-powered car or truck, 2,000 or so in an electric car. Elon Musk gets the American-invented chips for his Teslas from Taiwan, just like Volkswagen does.
Look at something more serious, the Javelin smart missile from Lockheed Martin and Raytheon. Shoulder-fired point, shoot, run. It automatically finds a tank and destroys it. Over 200 leading-edge chips inside each missile. Our F-35s are a $1.5 trillion line item on the military's budget through 2070. Those jets aren't getting off the ground without the American chips that are manufactured in Taiwan. That's why Taiwan is America's single point of failure.
Let me break this down to its very basics. We have Taiwan, this tiny island. Its very big neighbor, China, is the only country in the modern history of the world with any legitimate chance of dethroning us.
And China can't take us on directly. Taiwan, though...
If China successfully attacked Taiwan, we believe that major industries totaling at least $37 trillion of the global economy would crash or disappear. Now, I'm not sure you can overstate how dangerous this arms race really is.
Okay, so people are going to ask, why can't we just make the chips ourselves, as in right now?
America decided a long time ago to focus on inventing the brains of smart tech while outsourcing the brawn to Taiwan. Think about what it means to be intelligent, John. Fundamentally, a human brain is a large network of brain cells shooting electrical pulses between each other so we can process the world around us. The brain cells of a leading-edge chip are called integrated circuits. Over decades, they have shrunk exponentially in size. Today, each is 3 nanometers. Take just one human brain cell. You could fit 3,000 integrated circuits on it. It takes a very special machine to create integrated circuits. And each machine costs $150 million. You'll find a small fleet of them inside that facility, along with the best engineers in the world, so we can't just snap our fingers and make this happen.
Okay, so how many years until America's chip manufacturing actually catches up to where Taiwan is right now?
It's a great question. And if we had Taiwan's facilities, which we don't, and Taiwan froze their progress, we estimate about 5 years.
Okay, in China?
10 years, best case scenario. Xi Jinping already tried to speed up the learning curve. He put his close buddies in charge of a $150 billion initiative. Big surprise, a lot of that money got stolen.
So whenever the Chinese Communist Party makes a statement about reunification with Taiwan and cites the historical significance or some military need, a place to build some bases...
It's BS. The South China Sea is full of artificial islands China built just to build more bases on. Xi Jinping needs Taiwan for America's leading-edge chips, full stop.
Okay, if all that separates China from America's single point of failure is only 110 miles and a tiny waterway, what happens if Xi Jinping invades Taiwan?
Global bedlam. Remember the pandemic supply chain crunch, where new cars became impossible to find, used cars became as expensive as new cars? That's because our supply of chips, including our strategic reserves, crashed from 40 days down to 5. Now that cost America, just us, $750 billion. China invading Taiwan could bring America to a 0-day supply of our own chips.
If Xi Jinping took control of Taiwan and weaponized it against us, he would win this Cold War. He would have the power to turn back the clock on our modern American lives and control our future.
What do you mean exactly?
Giving Xi Jinping the power to decide when and if America can have our own leading-edge chips, he could control what gets put in them.
He can spy on each and every one of us.
Well, John, Xi Jinping reading our Amazon Prime emails would be the least of my worries. Maybe he wants to teach Americans a lesson. You know, you could walk up to your ATM and find access to what's left of your money completely cut off. China could cause our phones to go silent, our internet to go dark. Our hospitals could no longer provide most life-saving medical care. Xi could cripple our military. He could unleash widespread blackouts and energy shortages. And, John, tens of millions of American jobs would be eradicated. And we're talking global depression. Look, we certainly aren't trying to scare people, but Xi Jinping is quickly running out of options. Americans need to realize how vulnerable we really are. And not next week, right now. And that's the purpose of our Cold War 2.0 report.
All right, so we've just really scratched the surface here of what you've investigated. Big picture, what I find reassuring is you're extremely bullish on America's future.
China is the most powerful adversary we've faced since the Nazis in Germany. But our analysis is about probability, not possibility. The outcome with the highest probability, we won't have to fire one bullet, missile, or have to put any soldiers in harm's way to win this second Cold War. To defeat Xi Jinping, our analysis points to America implementing a plan straight out of President Reagan's playbook. It has 3 distinct components: eliminate, suffocate, checkmate.
Wow, okay, well, let's take them one at a time. Eliminate.
Simple and straightforward. Cold War 1.0. The Soviets needed America's leading-edge chips. Through crippling sanctions, America eliminated the Soviets' access to them. Cold War 2.0. China needs America's leading-edge chips. America has sanctioned China's supply of them back to the Stone Age. The chips in China's weapons and satellites, computers, smartphones, and smart cars. China has bold artificial intelligence ambitions. Sorry, Xi. You need America's chips for all that.
John, we don't need a crystal ball to see China's future. In our analysis, the most probable outcome, just remember, China's future is Russia's now. China's total import of chips has already plummeted 27%. What happens when 90% of their supply goes poof? It disappears. China's future, meet Russia's now. Per the State Department, the U.S. has forced crippling supply shortages on Russia. No more leading-edge chips for their jets, missile systems, smart weapons, radar, and satellites. Per the Department of Justice, no American chips for their nuclear and hypersonic missile programs or for their quantum computing projects. Right now, Putin spies keep getting busted trying to steal our chips for his war machine. This is scary stuff we're talking about. Until you see Putin spies are going after a few dozen chips at a time and using Etsy, a website that sells mittens for kittens, as fronts for their espionage. Russia's military has gotten so desperate, they're wandering around. They're breaking open refrigerators, dishwashers, TVs, even electric breast pumps for newborn babies. all to fix their weapons and defense systems. Now, not to be outdone, Xi Jinping spies have gotten busted using women wearing fake pregnancy costumes to smuggle chips. It's pathetic.
Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine without a safe supply of our chips in his strategic reserves. He brought dumb missiles to a smart missile fight. You want to target an enemy encampment, you know where your enemy is. Now draw a 1,000-foot radius more than the length of 3 football fields around your enemy in every direction. A dumb missile fired during the original Cold War would land somewhere, anywhere within that enormous circle, only about 20% of the time.
Not a great way to fight your enemy.
Compare that to what the U.S. sends Ukraine. 2 of the most effective weapons are Lockheed Martin's M142 High Mobility Artillery Rocket System, or HIMARS, and the Javelin missile Lockheed and Raytheon make those. HIMARS are 5-ton trucks, extremely mobile, easy to camouflage. They simultaneously fire 6 guided missiles that can each travel 50 miles and strike within 33 feet of their targets.
Now, HIMARS and Javelins aren't new, but the brains inside them keep getting smarter as we get more brain cells inside America's leading-edge chips. Broken record time, John. If you want to see China's future, look at Russia's now. Putin's military budget is almost 9 times bigger than Ukraine's. He's got 4 times the soldiers and armored vehicles. Putin's air and sea advantage is even greater. He thought he would just overwhelm Ukraine in a matter of days. Now, that was way back in February of 2022. Today, Putin has a crippled economy. He's losing a war to tiny Ukraine because Russia is stuck using weapons made 40 years ago.
Xi Jinping's military size and budget dwarfs Taiwan's. But that military has to cross open water to get to that island. Taiwan is surrounded by shallow water and steep cliffs. Get soldiers on the island, you've got mountains on the interior. And 93.5% of Taiwan's citizens are against reunification with China. Now, do you think our allies inside the EU and NATO want a brutal authoritarian holding their economy and future hostage?
No way.
Correct answer. America invents those chips, not China. Our allies have already given Xi a taste of what's coming. The term is called friendshoring, and Xi will soon have a hard time finding chips from any developed country. Plus, those specialized machines inside Taiwan's chip facilities, China uses them too. Now, 100% of the global supply of those machines comes from the Netherlands and Japan. So, tough luck, Xi. Our allies have eliminated your access to their tech. The authoritarian is about to get really desperate.
All right, now, based on your report, America still isn't taking any chances with Xi Jinping. Talk about the spy versus the spy stuff.
Remember, it's not the military's job or the CIA's or FBI's job to reveal our most sensitive intel, just because the public wants to see it.
All right, so tell us what you know, and folks can decide for themselves.
Check out what the Justice Department revealed about some of Russia's failed espionage attempts, specifically the mention of Directorate T. Russia's old KGB program tasked with conducting clandestine espionage missions to steal U.S. tech. During the original Cold War, President Reagan authorized the CIA to conduct Operation Farewell. We flipped the Soviet colonel who led the Directorate T program. He provided us with the Soviets' wish list of American technologies. We inserted our own Trojan horses into them and let our adversaries steal them. When we decided the Soviets needed to be taught a lesson, America used that compromised tech to blow up a Siberian gas pipeline. That explosion could be seen from space.
The Siberian pipeline was a $26 billion cash cow in today's dollars. Now, what were the Soviets going to say? That the American chips they sold from America were broken?
Fast forward to the present day. Ian, where does Putin get his chips now?
About 70% come from China.
Normally, the chips Xi Jinping sends Putin malfunction around 2% of the time. Terrible quality. Rumor has it the current failure rate is 40%. 40% are duds.
Now, John, are you trusting a tank or missile that fails 40% of the time?
No way.
What if the United States is already letting China steal some or a lot of our chips? Sure looks like a modern-day Operation Farewell.
All right, so taken together, have all these actions started a countdown clock to the end of Xi Jinping's reign?
Yes, the second component of America's plan will make sure of that. We're going to economically suffocate all of China's glorified spy firms. Uncle Sam has added a lot of them to the federal government's ban list. America's big checks cut by the world's biggest economy and every business inside it, gone. Huawei was once the largest private company in China. In 2019, it was worth an estimated $174 billion. Today, only around $65 billion. And that's still big for now, John, but they continue to lose global market share. But they're supporting nearly 200,000 employees.
Imagine when all the banned firms start losing value like Huawei. America is going to keep this up until Xi Jinping screams uncle. Our allies will continue turning up the heat with more friendshoring. The rare earth minerals that aren't so rare in China, our friends in Canada have enough to cut China out of the mix. Our allies are also aggressively building manufacturing plants for all kinds of goods in Vietnam, Malaysia, Taiwan, and so forth. This should expose Xi Jinping's so-called economic miracle for what it really is, a paper tiger.
Now, you're not saying China's economic miracle didn't happen.
I mean, that happened, sure, just not on President Xi's watch. He took power in 2012 when the entire global economy was soaring after the Great Recession. Now, Xi's predecessors generated annual growth that was more than 2 times better, while much of Xi's growth is an illusion. That zigzagging line represents year-to-year growth under his rule. So from 2012 to 2020, Xi did nothing but underperform. Then the pandemic shuts down the world. He imprisons his whole country through lockdowns. But China's GDP explodes? That growth is an illusion. Look how it plummeted right after. And Xi lit the fuse on a ticking time bomb of debt. Now, how is he going to recover? An average American contributes 472% more to our economy than an average Chinese citizen contributes to theirs. Chinese consumers just aren't coming to his rescue.
Long term, Xi is powerless without our leading edge chips. It's what makes the endgame of this Cold War extremely predictable. The people of China will eventually evict Xi Jinping from his palace. But in the near term, he will continue to get more desperate. Desperate and dangerous are synonyms in this conflict. The hard facts, though, point to one highly probable outcome: checkmate.
Which happens to be the third part of America's plan.
Correct. America is the brains behind the brains of smart tech. Now, we're bringing the brawn inside our borders. Last year, the House of Representatives and Senate overwhelmingly passed the CHIPS and Science Act. It authorized $280 billion to create a sweeping nationwide chip manufacturing program. And the major highlights of this are $39 billion to help leading-edge chip manufacturers build facilities right here in America. $13 billion for research and development into next-generation chips, $10 billion to build 20 regional tech hubs to optimize that supply chain, and $81 billion for loans and grants. The result, John, is going to be Made in America 2.0 on steroids. It's absolutely going to transform our country.
This is really a massive infrastructure play. Historically, when the U.S. invests in infrastructure projects, we get a 3.7 times return on our money over 20 years. Applying that to just the federal government's $280 billion would get you to a $1 trillion return right there. But the big bucks, trillions of dollars, is coming from the private sector. Texas Instruments has committed $30 billion to build a facility in Sherman, Texas. Samsung, $17 billion for theirs in Taylor, Texas. Qualcomm and Global Foundries are building a $4.2 billion facility in upstate New York. Micron is investing $100 billion to build theirs in central New York. And They're doubling down with another $15 billion facility in Boise, Idaho. Intel will have a $20 billion plant outside Columbus, Ohio. Integra Technologies and EMP Shield committed $3.7 billion. Their plants will be near Topeka and Wichita, Kansas.
Even the Taiwan Semiconductor Company is doing their part with a $40 billion chip plant in Phoenix, Arizona, right near where Mike lives. Already the private sector has committed $300 billion, and much more is coming, John. This new Cold War will become the fourth inflection point for America since the early 1900s. The three other being World War I and World War II and the original Cold War.
Okay, by inflection point, you're saying exactly what?
Well, we emerged victorious from each conflict, remember? Each time, our country and economy went through a radically positive transformation. And each inflection point was brought home thanks to a patriotic initiative involving a joint venture between the government, the private sector, and the American people. Now, look at the original Cold War. President Eisenhower passed the National Defense and Interstate Highways Act. It funded the modern highway system we use to travel and transport, around $11 trillion of economic value today. The top secret Pentagon agency, DARPA, came soon after. The original internet, cloud computing, GPS, a lot of other inventions we still use in our daily lives emerged from that period. And Mike, you worked with DARPA and the Pentagon on the internet project.
A long time ago, I sure did.
And that changed the world, John. We're at the beginning of this cycle repeating itself once again.
Okay, so the CHIPS legislation mentions something called the For America Fund. Can folks watching lend their support to this patriotic initiative through that?
Yes, and they should jump at the chance. How often do you get to be directly involved in protecting our country and defeating our most dangerous adversary without having to enlist in the military?
You know, this plan reminds me of the Victory Bond program from the First World War.
Yeah, but those bonds didn't create generational wealth. The original Cold War did for shrewd investors. It ignited a tech boom. Hewlett-Packard and Texas Instruments were unsung heroes of the Cold War. Defense contractors like Lockheed Martin and Raytheon IPO'd. Apple and Microsoft were Cold War companies. These extraordinary windfalls created generational wealth for many early investors.
All right. Now, Ian, we've covered your Wall Street credentials. Michael, you're now a strategic asset for large financial institutions and high net worth investors. Now, after you and Ian prepared your Cold War 2.0 report, you also created a series of investment reports to help Americans participate in this wave of generational wealth you predict is on the horizon. Now, I can see they're all labeled Checkmate. Tell us about what you put together.
The investment reports are sequential, starting at the core, the CHIPS and Science Act. Then we methodically expand our view because this is much bigger than the CHIPS themselves.
Now, you're even launching this amazing online community with, weekly live streams?
John, that's the most important piece of this puzzle. We're going to help Americans navigate their money and investments through this fourth inflection point, step by step, week by week.
Okay, why don't you quickly tell us about this first investment briefing? It is the $37 trillion Kingmakers.
Sure. It's a complete assessment of the winners and losers from the CHIPS and Science Act. We've investigated, analyzed, and rated the major players. We're making 3 specific stock recommendations in 3 American companies. These are foundational moves. They're all going to be large, established companies. We've compiled all the research, plus the risk and reward profiles for each, so folks can make wise decisions based on their financial goals. Now, the upside we're projecting for these companies ranges from 3 to 4x returns over the next 3 years.
All right, so can you share one of your 3 recommendations right now?
Mike and I really like onsemi. They provide industry-leading intelligent sensor, power management, and connectivity solutions. Its products help customers solve design problems in advanced electronic systems. In short, this company creates state-of-the-art sensing products for a brighter future. This is the most conservative of our targets.
All right, well, next up we have Checkmate, America Fights Back. Now, this addresses the Trojan horses Xi Jinping has planted inside our country.
In 2017, Xi passed the National Intelligence Law. Article 7, all businesses and people have to assist President Xi's spying. Article 10, do whatever it takes to execute the intelligence missions, be it inside China or anywhere else.
Okay, I'm kind of at a loss for words. That's an actual law?
It is, and we've profiled the American firms with the capabilities to send China's Trojan horses to the glue factory.
Now that's a good one, Ian. The reality is, China spies on us, we spy on China, everybody knows it. In 2017, China pitched a tourism project, a $100 million garden. Nations build these in America to honor their cultures. China's project was centered around one of those tall structures, a pagoda. Here's a map of Washington, D.C., and X marks the spot. China chose one of the highest points in our nation's capital, close to the Capitol building, Supreme Court, and military installations. At the last second, U.S. intelligence uncovered proof China was smuggling in spy technology to install inside that pagoda.
Well, comforting, I guess, to know that they failed.
That time, what about those spy towers? Not as pretty as a pagoda, but they can get the job done.
And remember, there are 200 separate spy tower networks spread across the country. The private companies that own them bought Huawei's tech because it was cheaper, before Huawei landed on our banned list.
America isn't letting those stand, John. The cost to replace Xi Jinping's sleeper cell technology is estimated between $5 and $6 billion. Now, we've profiled the American firm that has the towers that can be popped right in, and another firm with superior telecommunications tech to Huawei's. We like these two investments because they're both passive income machines. Now, over the last decade, one of the firms has boosted its annual dividend payment by 551%, and the other by 243%.
Now, we'll be battling Xi's Trojan horses for some time. Currently, the total addressable market for cybersecurity software is sitting right at $2 trillion. But only about 10% of U.S. companies are using the proper measures to protect themselves.
So, back of the napkin math, that means we have a $1.8 trillion gap that needs to be filled.
Right now. By 2025, the annual cost of cyber attacks is set to reach $10.5 trillion a year. We've determined that 2 American firms could be given the critical responsibilities of protecting our country from China's cyber warfare measures. Both have already secured the early stage contracts with all the right state, local, and federal government customers. But those contracts could grow exponentially when the floodgates open. We believe these firms have 5x upside within the next 2 years. Long term, though, their potential is off the charts.
Okay, so reading your next investment report, you can't help but get the sense that America's future is really extremely bright, especially for the folks who follow your plan.
John, the CHIPS Act is a lit fuse that will set up a lucrative chain reaction with some rapidly growing companies that are developing world-changing technologies. Now, these stocks are more speculative in nature than the others we're profiling.
So don't bet the farm, as they say?
Well, you don't need to. Now, all investments carry risk. Mike knows this as well. Nothing is guaranteed. But these are the types of investments where a little can go a long way.
All right. Now, Ian, you were an early investor in the electric vehicle boom, betting on multiple startups and small companies, including Tesla back in 2010. You were also an early investor in cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin in 2013, Ethereum in 2017. Those were moonshot investments at the time. Now, one of the greatest opportunities in front of Americans literally involves moonshots.
Right. During the first Cold War, we had the space race. The Soviets with Sputnik, we had the Apollo missions. Americans were starting from zero. Today, we have companies like SpaceX perfecting reusable rockets. Already, SpaceX is one of the most valuable companies in the world. Now, Cold War II is here. China is pushing hard to achieve supremacy in space, and the headlines, they speak for themselves. The head of the Office of Space and Counterspace says China and Russia can do a lot of things on the moon, including knock out our ATMs, gas stations, cell phones, and internet access. Russia even views space as a battlefield that will decide future conflicts. The United States is obviously making space a priority. our leading edge chips give us a formidable advantage in this area. The space economy is already a $469 billion a year industry on its way to reaching the trillions. So there's a lot of money in play. And we're targeting a small cap company that leverages the space race to develop weapons and communications essential to modern warfare. Now, this company's technology provides high-performance signal processing and space-related solutions for counter space, special ops, cyber, and other space system missions.
So basically, the kind of technology you're going to need to win the wars of the future.
Exactly. And the company will continue to be on the leading edge. Now, some of their upcoming projects are part of a Pentagon effort to partner with innovators and incubate technology-focused businesses in Silicon Valley. Now, while you likely have never heard of them, John, this company's tech helps us all sleep better at night, knowing that Americans are protected from potential military threats.
So while it's a speculative play, somebody could actually put a couple of hundred or a couple of $1,000s into it today and be sitting pretty if it takes off. Now, to achieve Made in America 2.0, we need a manufacturing moonshot as well, which you've identified.
Yes, so growth in America's AI chips will outpace other chips by 5x. What happens to the American companies that have already laid the groundwork as AI revolutionizes an $8 trillion manufacturing industry? Betting on those small firms now could lead to generational wealth for investors.
We've profiled a small stock that provides AI-powered robotics to American warehouses. Their technology is turnkey. It can be integrated into existing warehouses, saving companies of all sizes lots of money. Also, this company optimizes American worker productivity. It doesn't replace it.
10x in 5 years is the minimum upside we've targeted for each of the stocks we've analyzed in this report. I'm hesitant to share our final projections because the numbers can get pretty large. It's best to see the research we've compiled.
All right, so tell us about one more moonshot you've assessed.
John, America has been 100% energy independent since 2019 because we produce more energy than we consume, and we export more than we import. But we're still vulnerable to price shocks and energy shortages in more volatile parts of the world. Now, OPEC controls 40% of global oil supplies, for instance, Russia with natural gas and such. So strategically, our next arena to conquer is total American energy freedom. This means maximizing every finite source of oil, gas, coal, all of it, but also unlocking the full capabilities of the infinite energy sources around us. So that means we'll be no longer vulnerable to these price shocks.
We were over a decade into the first Cold War when atomic weapons became atomic power. And the first nuclear reactor began fueling our power grid in Shippingport, Pennsylvania. Now we're mastering nuclear fusion. Nuclear fusion recreates the sun right here on Earth. It's clean, renewable, limitless, and an unweaponizable power source. Who's at the forefront of the nuclear fusion revolution? The US, EU, UK, and Japan.
Without our leading edge chips, safe to say, China is not making that list.
And they'll never get on it. The US companies in this arena, like Tay Technologies, have made early investors a fortune. But Main Street Americans have largely been cut off from participating. Fusion energy startups have lined the pockets of Goldman Sachs, Google, Chevron, and extremely wealthy individuals. But those reactors won't be commercially available until the 2030s. It's not going to play a real role in this second Cold War.
Mike and I are interested in the investments that help America achieve total energy freedom this decade. Now, the next natural step in this chain is to make the mass adoption of solar power economically viable. Electric cars have eliminated the need for their drivers to worry about volatile swings with gas prices. They never need to stop at a gas station. But Americans can't experience total energy freedom until they've eliminated the need to worry about price swings with their electricity bills at home. I mean, just take Italians last year. They were paying $3,000 a month for electricity when the Russia-Ukraine war broke out. And if there's a power outage in an American neighborhood, their lights and appliances need to keep running. To me and to us, that's American energy freedom. By 2027, renewables will be the biggest source for electricity generation worldwide. And no energy source beats solar when it comes to growth. The industry is racing to become a $608 billion industry. The problem, John, is that China controls 80% of the world's solar power manufacturing. If nothing is done to stop this, they'll reach 95%. And that's not just me saying that. That's according to the U.S. intelligence community. So we've analyzed a small American company with the ability to knock China out of its position of dominance. And they've quickly built a 1,000 patent-strong pipeline of solar technology for residential use as well as with utility companies. And customers in 100 countries are already lining up.
And that small company's potential upside for investors?
Well, I believe 10x in 5 years, bare minimum.
All right, so you've prepared 2 more Checkmate reports for Americans. Both focus on keeping people safe. Checkmate, Augment and Defend is specifically about keeping Americans' money safe.
John, we believe folks should have a few strategic investments in their portfolios that could offer wealth defense from China, inflation, rising interest rates, and a looming recession. Now, we've got a unique real estate play as well as another in farmland, but we're most excited about a currency play. It's a tiny currency, depending on exchange rates. It'll come in somewhere around 30 on the list of the world's largest currencies. But we've identified some interesting reasons why Americans should store a significant portion of their liquid capital in this currency.
Now, one of the things you'll learn from reviewing your work is that when it comes to China's Trojan horses, and I'm not sure of any other way to say this, much of this is our fault.
We opened the door and let the bad guy, President Xi, into sensitive areas of our lives and finances.
We certainly did. All right, in your final Checkmate report, you're helping Americans eradicate these Trojan horses from their daily lives.
The intel community calls these threats CVEs, common vulnerabilities and exposures. To stay safe, they recommend Americans pursue a zero-trust security model. We're showing folks how to successfully implement that model. So this report is a simple, step-by-step plan for building a digital Fort Knox around your most sensitive information. We've profiled the most secure virtual private networks folks should install on their computers and phones, the safest banks to store their money, how to remain completely anonymous online. We're covering everything.
Michael and Ian, this incredible collection of reports isn't the end of the journey, but really it's just the beginning. Now, earlier I mentioned you're launching weekly live streams to help Americans capitalize on generational wealth opportunities that could emerge from this new Cold War, while simultaneously protecting themselves from any economic threats that arise. You're quickly building a powerful community of Main Street Americans, and you've recruited an impressive group of world-renowned experts to join the cause. So, what are you calling this bold initiative?
It's called Strategic Fortunes. And our goal was to build a small army of real-world experts to help everyday Americans make real money in real time. We have dozens of the greatest business minds, professional investors, and economists helping us behind the scenes and during our live streams. Wall Street's top chartered market technicians, for instance, and economists from the London School of Economics. We even have the winner of Barron's Top Money Manager Award on our team. I'm really excited about this.
Okay, Michael, you're playing a big role in this too.
As big as possible. This is a massive undertaking.
Okay, explain how it's going to work.
So every Monday, once a week, the cameras will turn on and the video feed will begin. Each weekly live stream lasts an hour and they're 100% interactive. Everybody's talking to each other, working together, so we can win together. Folks can participate using their smartphones or computers. Now, each live stream session consists of 4 separate 15-minute objectives. Objective number 1, my team's latest Cold War 2.0 debriefing. We'll examine every new development in this conflict between China and the United States. Objective number 2, we'll conduct a SWOT analysis.
As in strengths, weaknesses,
opportunities, and threats. You got it. A streamlined SWOT analysis on our economy, the financial markets, major events on Capitol Hill, and around the world. If the Federal Reserve hikes rates, there will be winners and losers from that. Significant legislation out of D.C., same thing.
All right, so how are you going to help folks make money through this initiative?
Great question. That's the purpose of the third and fourth objectives. Objective number 3, we'll spend 15 minutes profiling the latest strategic fortunes investment targets. We're going to recommend a new opportunity with every live stream. Now, John, Warren Buffett once said, if you aren't willing to own a stock for 10 years, don't own it for 10 minutes. This is the approach we're taking. We'll not overreact to the whims of the market. We're going to focus on the task at hand. We'll present the risk profile, upside potential, a full examination of each company.
All right. Who on your team is investing, including you?
Of course, I'm not making a recommendation unless I'm willing to put my own money down on the table. This way, our interests are aligned.
I'm definitely investing in these companies because I want in on this.
Okay, makes sense. Now, the fourth and final objective is what?
Well, that's the hot seat. Now, give me a second to explain. No two investors are alike. We have different goals, financial situations, obviously. But we want this initiative to evolve along with our community. So every week, we're going to send a 360-degree assessment around. Folks can take a minute to fill these out. Feedback, what you liked or didn't like about the last live stream. And definitely tell us what stocks, cryptocurrencies, startups you want covered in the next live stream. And folks can send in from their own portfolios or investments they're looking at. We'll spend the final 15 minutes putting the most popular investments from your assessments on the hot seat. There's a bunch of other stuff involved in this.
All right. What about if someone can't make a live stream session?
No problem. They're all transcribed. We also release a live stream action plan summarizing the major findings and investment opportunities. This is a formal report on each investment. It'll be sent around via email too. All of our research, it's there. We want to make it easy for folks to join our community, participate, and benefit from it.
And Ian, it's important that they do. Now, you and Michael made that clear today. Thank you again for being here.
John, we're glad to help.
And we're ready to get started.
All right, let's do that. Now, to access Ian and Mike's Cold War 2.0 report and their powerful series of investment and personal security reports, click the button below this video for more information. They're also inviting you to join their Strategic Fortunes community. On behalf of Ian King and Michael Carr, I want to thank you for taking part in today's discussion concerning Cold War 2.0 between America and China. I'm John Daly.